the short run and the medium term. Okay. Yeah, but only in the short and the medium term, which means that yes, in the short and the medium term, possibly the inequality, an increase in economic growth can lead to increase in the income inequality. Okay. But when you use the time series data, or when people used the time series data, then they did not find a significant relationship. They found some relationship for some countries, but it was not a very convincing evidence that you don't get this type of the inverted U type of evidence for a large number of countries and for several years. So using the panel data by the reliable time series data, I think I meant the panel data. Okay, so those articles which use the panel data, they did not come up with a very firm conclusion in support of the Kuznets hypothesis. So that's why I said that it fails to hold. Okay, and also it was found that it's not just the contemporaneous relationship. It's not just today's inequality affecting today's growth. It could be an intertemporal or the long-term relationship. So some articles tried to assess or examine that, and they found that the initial inequality can have a significant impact on subsequent growth. Okay, so it's not today's inequality affecting today's growth, but it is today's inequality will affect your long-term growth. Okay? So the initial inequality will affect the subsequent growth significantly because there will be a lack of demand for because overall there will be lack of demand when there is inequality. Because remember, the inequality affects your consumption pattern, okay? And inequality affects the demand pattern as well. If you read the textbook, the chapter in red, it talks about the demand pattern, the countries with high inequality, what sort of demand they will have, because mostly the countries with high inequality, there will be high demand for basic necessities, right? So it affects the demand pattern, and then the producer will respond to that demand. Okay? So most of the people will be engaged in agricultural production because there is more demand for basic food items and so on because of the high inequality. And also there will be less physical investment because of the inequality. And also it's not just the income inequality, it is the land inequality also, which can affect your economic growth. So it says that the land inequality can affect your economic growth through restricting the access to the credit market. I have discussed it in the lecture as well, using the two-generation model or two-period model. Okay, and because of this lack of the inequality leading to the restricted access to the credit market, will lead to lower investment in human capital, and therefore there will be lower growth, and also there will be a higher level of poverty because of the low human capital formation. Okay, and in support of but these findings are based on the panel data. So it's not a case study or a country study. But if you look at the country experiences, for example, the low land inequality in South Korea and Taiwan with the high growth, and also the high inequality in Latin America with low income growth is supporting the point before, that is inequality is detrimental to growth, okay? Because countries with a low land inequality achieve higher growth, whereas the countries with high land inequality achieve lower growth, okay? So therefore there could be a negative relationship throughout, all through, okay? But that's all about the land, but not about the income, so you have to be careful what you are talking here. And also we know that the many studies did not find any systematic relationship, no significant, because sometimes it is, for some countries it was positive, some countries it was negative, and maybe the relationship is really non-linear. Okay, so it's not it's not linear. So if you've got different types of countries put together, then possibly you cannot come up with any systematic relationship. Okay? Which means that the other factors are also affecting this relationship significantly. In that sense, the income inequality might not be endogenous. It might not be exogenous. It could be endogenous, which means the other factors are affecting your income inequality, and then that income inequality is affecting your economic growth. Okay. And here, yes, the next paragraph is about the endogeneity. the income growth and the inequality seem to reinforce each other. So there is a reinforcement going on, which means that the inequality or growth, neither is exogenous in that sense. So you can't really convincingly say that I will put the inequality on the left-hand side, sorry, on the right-hand side, and the economic growth on the left-hand side as a dependent variable. You can't do that if there is this sort of reinforcement or there's a feedback going on from inequality to growth and the growth to inequality. And the paper by the Barcel et al., it summarizes many findings. So if you read this particular article, you get the findings from other articles as well, because there's a they summarized the findings that I mentioned. Some of the findings I mentioned before also reported in this article, but you can read the main article as well. Those are also on the blackboard. So they also found that the low income inequality in East Asia contributed to faster growth. So in that sense, the income inequality can reduce or a reduction in income inequality can be achieved along with the high growth. Okay? So therefore, the developing countries should aim for reduction in inequality. At the same time, they can achieve a higher economic growth as well. Okay? But in these East Asian countries, the policies that reduce the poverty and the inequality, such as basic education and the increased demand for labor, also stimulated growth, which means that it was not just the inequality, it is some policies reduced poverty, and that reduction in poverty led to a decline in inequality, and then that reduction in inequality had a significant impact. Just reduction in inequality itself may not have a significant impact on economic growth. But if you can achieve the lower inequality through education, through demand, through employment creation, job creation, then possibly that will have a lasting impact on your long-run economic growth. But if you say that, okay, I'll achieve I'll reduce the income inequality by progressive taxation, I think then possibly the economic growth would not be very high. But where the countries achieve this low inequality through human capital formation and through increasing demand for labor force by creating the employment opportunities, they achieve the better, higher growth. Okay, and because the relationship was significant as well. Okay. Right. The fourth topic is about education. It has got two parts. The first part is the discuss the arguments for public financing of education, which is quite standard. All these arguments are there in the lecture handouts. Okay. So basically, I just summarize them in one paragraph. So you just need to explain then why the public financing in education is needed. Okay. So once you have mentioned that, then it says that evaluate the effectiveness of various strategies pursued by the governments in different developing countries. So now we talk about what sort of policies are needed. If we say that yes, there are some arguments in favor of this public financing, then what can the government do? Then you can read the article on high-performing Asian economies, the HPAEs. So for strategies, as I said, that the answer should focus on these high-performing Asian economies, where and you can compare it with other OECD countries, okay? Because comparing with the OECD countries, it was found that in these high-performing Asian economies, they spend a larger proportion of their government budget on education, particularly on basic education. But the more importantly, although here you pay the tuition fee, but at that time, in high-performing Asian economies, the students at the tertiary level, they used to pay at a much higher level. Okay? Being at middle-income countries, they used to pay a very high tuition fee at a higher level, whereas in the OECD countries, the cost per unit or per student was much smaller here. Okay? Because they put the highest priorities on the universal basic education with quality, and there is a very high dependence on private financing for the higher secondary and the tertiary education. So there is a heavily, the higher secondary and the tertiary education is heavily dependent on private financing, whereas because of the resources generated in the tertiary level, higher secondary and the tertiary education, the government will could provide a very good quality basic education at a lower level. Okay, so that was so it's not just about the public financing at all levels. Okay, so you need to distribute between different levels. And also it was found that the user fee at the secondary and the higher secondary and the tertiary level, the high user fee creates a demand for better quality education. And also, instead of having more teachers, they had better paid teachers. Okay, so the average salary used to be quite high at the tertiary education level. So therefore, these good quality teachers can offer the better education as well. Okay, so the students, from the students, there's a high demand because they pay a high tuition fee. At the same time, the teachers also were highly qualified and they offered the high salary. So which means that the quality can address some of the quantitative problem. Here, if you look at the pupil-teacher ratio, possibly the pupil-teacher ratio will be higher because you have got a small number of teachers. But as long as you have got the good quality teachers, then possibly they can offset this quantity factor through the quality. Okay. So therefore there are different ways to compare. If you look at the student teacher ratio, of course the student teacher ratio in the OECD countries is much lower because the class size is quite small. But in those countries, in the Asian countries, this ratio is quite high. But that's only the quantity term, the ratio term. But if you look at the quality, then possibly the good quality of the highly paid teachers can offset some of these high ratio impact. Okay? And also I gave you the example of Indonesia and Bolivia, where the two countries started at the same level and they allocated exactly the same proportion of their GDP on education. Okay, and then after, let's say after 27 years, they calculate the impact. Two countries spending the same percentage of their GDP on education, and one country had a very, very high positive growth rate for the next, I think 17 or 27 years. But it's there in the lecture note. Whereas the other countries like Bolivia, they achieved very little, because it's not just the amount, how much you spend. It is also important at what level of education the money is being invested. Okay? Because in Indonesia, within the total amount they spend out of their GDP, they spend more on primary education mainly. Okay. So similar public expenditure can cause a significant variation in the outcome because of the differences in the allocation between the various levels of education, right? Because Indonesia invested heavily in the basic education, in the primary level, and to some extent tertiary level, and particularly in the rural education, whereas the Bolivia did not do that. So they spent the same percentage of their GDP, but they did not achieve that much. Their economic growth was negative even for some time. They achieved a negative growth rate. Whereas in Indonesia, the growth rate was quite significant. Per capita income growth was quite significant. And you can have a case study on Progresa in Mexico, and also you can have, and other countries also, they also adopted this type of cash transfer program. I briefly mentioned about this Progresa program in Israel when we talked about the South African pension scheme as well. So the Progresa is another strategy that can be adopted, which means that it is a conditional cash transfer to the parents. So this could be another strategy that if you think that the opportunity cost of education is very high, then you can address it through conditional cash transfer. Okay, so you offset the opportunity cost through cash transfer. So the parents, they get the money if they send their children to the school. That is the main idea of the Progresa. Okay. Now, then it's a very good answer. We'll also analyze the negative impact of the introduction of fee on enrollment rate in some African countries. I know that everybody may not see this, okay? Because the strategies means we should discuss some strategies which work, and we should also analyze some strategies which didn't work. So if you exclude the last line, then the whole paragraph is about the strategies which worked, basically. Only the last line, the last sentence is about the strategies which did not work, basically. So you should report some of those strategies as well which did not work in some African countries. Okay? And the article is there on the blackboard.